There's going to be slides up here. There's also a piece of paper in the back. Once a month we do the lectures here, so we'd love to have you back. We also do taping, thanks to Cooperative Extension Services. So we have this taped, and then we show it on our website in a few days. And then right now we're also working on our web streaming. So we've been working out the kinks here, and as soon as that goes live, we'll broadcast it more, that it's an option as well. Just wanted to remind everybody to turn off your cell phones. It's a standard announcement at the beginning of all of these, but I always forget, so there's your reminder. Just a little bit about ACEP. We're an applied energy research group at the university, which basically means we work to put the right information into the hands of decision makers to make good decisions for energy in Alaska. And we really focus on community scale, because there's other folks that really focus on the individual consumer really well. So we could focus on the community level, but then you think, well, if you're focused on the community level, what is ACEP doing talking about local food production? Well, when you think about it, Alaska is the largest user of energy in the United States. And a lot of that has to do with, of course, transportation costs, and a lot of that involves bringing our food up to us. So as far as looking at energy from a macro level for Alaska, looking at how we create and consume our food is a major part of that picture. It also makes us, of course, extremely vulnerable to different fluctuations in energy pricing. And so it really does make a difference in the energy picture in Alaska, how we eat. And when we were talking about this lecture, we said, oh, then it's energy savings, but there are also realities of local food production in Alaska, especially with greenhouses and what is the energy consumption there. So we're going to be talking a little bit about the economics behind local food production here as well. And then there's some exciting new things that we have been looking at the university for using energy sources, for instance, diesel generators, to extend the growing season. So to use waste heat from diesel generators to do food production in, say, the villages or around town. So there's some exciting things that you'll be hearing about from that end as well. So our speakers tonight, I'll go in reverse order. The first is Jeff Werner, or the last will be Jeff Werner. He is from the School of Natural Resources and Agricultural Sciences. If a lot of the large-scale greenhouse projects in the interior have Jeff's name written all over them. He was a big person in the Chena Hot Springs resort greenhouses that are being run on waste heat from their geothermal resources. He's also had a role in the Pikes Landing greenhouses, and he will be playing a role in a future project that the university is doing in conjunction with Tanana Chiefs Conference in Galena. So he's going to be telling us a little bit about that. Then we have Marcus Mager, who is from the Alaska Center for Energy and Power. He's going to be talking a little bit about the economics of local food production in greenhouses. And our first speaker is Tom Zimmer. And for those of you who know local food, you probably have heard Tom speak. Tom is the Ecology Center Director at Calypso Farm and the co-founder. He and his family founded that in 2000. He does a variety of things at Calypso, and he is a very engaging speaker, and I look forward to his talk. So Tom, inspire me.
All right, well, thank you all for coming out. I'm going to talk to you about energy and food. This is fairly simple. We all eat. It's a basic thing that we need to do. But I want you to delve a little deeper into thinking about where your food comes from and make you maybe challenge some of your sources of food and your information about food. And I'm going to give a quick slideshow, and we'll pass on down the line through the other speakers, and then at the end we're going to have questions and answers. And that's what I'm most interested in, is starting a discussion with you guys about food and about what our community has here. So food and energy, some very simple basic questions. How is your food produced? I am an organic farmer. My wife is an organic farmer. I'm the maintenance man. But there's a lot of labeling that goes on. Hello? All right. How about that? Does that work? All right. So, there's a lot of labeling that goes on in our society, and we started many years ago organic farming, people working with the environment, with natural systems, and now organic has kind of been turned into, there's a conventional organic system. We want to grow food ecologically, mimicking natural cycles. So I want you to think about how your food is produced. What are the energy inputs into that? It's fairly simple, but it's things that we really need to think about and piece all this together. Again, packaging, more and more packaging. Everything's labeling and the inks and all of the energy put into that. How far has your food traveled? Well, the numbers are really hard to get a handle on because people are still throwing around, oh, the average meal has traveled 1,500 miles. Well, that's a number that came up with after the Second World War, and that number has still been kicked around for many, many years. And obviously in Alaska, 1,500 miles doesn't quite get us to where it's truly coming from. But thinking about how far your food has come, I don't want to get off on a social justice issue, but I also want you to think about the people who have handled your food. What are the energy parts of the equation there? All the people working in the fields, the people working in the processing plants. That's a lot of human power. Those are things that we have to be considerate of too, because there's a lot of people who are getting minimum or sub-minimum wage to produce our food. And we have a lot of people complaining about price of food, but we're not paying. We are not paying the true cost of the food that we are eating. I worked on a farm in California. They've been around, it's a large organic farm, full belly farm. They sell corn, fresh, beautiful corn, and for the last 20 years they've been selling 4 ears for $1. When I was there, they decided, well, we need to sell 3 for $1. And people turned away from their stand and said, I refuse to get only 3 for $1. This is after 20 years of selling corn for 4 for $1. And yet, the places they're selling it were affluent communities where the people's income had gone skyrocketing. So, just thinking about equality, that's the other part of this cycle of the food cycle there. Now here, I'm going to get on the bully pulpit. How many of you out there get a box from Full Circle Farm? Nobody. Fantastic. Yes. Excellent. Well, there are a lot of people who are intrigued by their ecological footprint, people who want to buy organic. I applaud you for being concerned about where your food comes from and going that route. Now, Full Circle Farm is a little deceptive in how this is a farm in Washington that produces a very small amount of their food, and they ship food in from all over the world to put into a box, and they call themselves community shared agriculture. And then they FedEx it up to us, and in Fairbanks alone, there are 15 or 16 drop sites, of which some of our state agencies are involved in. So they're getting a free ride to get their food brought in, FedEx. A lot of this food has the same stickers that you find at Fred Meyer's, because these people are buying it from the same distributors, putting it in a nice box, it says community supported agriculture, and FedExing up to you. Not a very good environmental footprint there. So I'll get off my soapbox there, but thank you for not. And in the villages, this might be a good option to get veggies up there, but in Fairbanks, we have a lot of sources for food. So how do we close the gap? That's what Calypso Farm and Ecology Center's mission is we're trying to educate people about how to grow more of your own food, getting connected with the soil, with the farmers. We're not trying to grow everyone's food, but we are trying to encourage people to grow as much as you can. We have a lot of students, about 2,000 students a year, come out to the farm. Hands-on experience. This girl had never milked a goat before. I don't know if she ever will again, but it will be something she can put down on her resume there. But fresh food. We have a short growing season, but we have a very intense growing season. Growing a garden. I was just down in Anchorage with Jeff and a bunch of other people at a food policy council, and there were a lot of numbers being batted around there. 1955. Supposedly in 1955, this state was producing close to 50% of its own food. That's pretty impressive. Of course, the population was lower. Maybe people weren't eating so many Oreos, but there was definitely, people were supplying close to 50% of their food. Today, we have a pretty dismal single-digit number of what we're actually producing in the state. And hopefully the next two speakers will talk more about what we're trying to do to increase our food production here. But growing your own garden is definitely a starting point. Know your farmer, get connected. There's a lot of small farms in town here. And because of Full Circle, they don't all have their CSAs full. So if you want fresh veggies, call up your local farms and get in on the CSA. We're going to be harvesting next week. I had spinach for lunch. It was good. Calypso is doing school garden projects where we're working in collaboration with the school district, and we're getting kids to grow food on the school lot, and then they're selling it at farmers markets. Hunter Elementary School, Wood River, Pearl Creek, F.E. Cochran, and U Park. Every day, Monday through Thursday during the summer, there will be a farm stand at one of those schools, so you can get local food. Join a CSA, like I was saying a moment ago. Shop at the farmer's market. Lots of options. And we want to grow here, but we also want to sell our food here. We want you guys to be buying as much Alaska grown. The more you buy, the better the whole economy is for us, and it's a positive feedback notion here. So buying local is very, very important for all aspects of the food energy. Of course, back before the railroad, there was a lot of food preservation. Once we got cheaper shipping and air, now we have a lot less preserving. But there's a lot of old timers out there that still put up a lot of good food, and the options are very powerful out there. And we haven't even talked about quality yet. So storing crops for the winter. How many of you out there have a root cellar? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So a number of you have root cellars. So people are working towards that. It takes more time, maybe more of your own energy, but the quality and the connection is there. So eating closer to home, that's really what it's about. I'm going to wind up here in a moment. These are golden beets. A lot of what we can grow locally, you can't even get in the store. The store varieties are grown for transportation, not for quality. There's broccoli romanesco, these golden beets. A lot of these things, they would look like hell if they were shipped up here. But when we pick them Thursday morning and hand them to you Thursday afternoon, they are at peak condition, and you guys get to eat the best. Or better yet, out of your own garden, you go out and pick it, and 5 minutes later, it's on the plate. So where do you get started? I was told I was allowed to put a little shameless plug in here. Memorial Day, 9 to noon, we have our plant sale up at the farm. Come up to the farm. I will give you a tour of the farm, show you how we're producing vegetables, and we have some pretty innovative ways of starting seedlings with soil blocks, but mark your calendars and come on up. Even if you don't need starts, come on up and have a tour around the farm. And we have lots of baby lambs up there right now, so there's activities for the whole family. So if you can save your questions for afterwards, we will we'll hopefully have a discussion there. You can look us up on the web, calypsofarm.org, and I'm going to pass this over to Marcus, who's going to take over and look at the next thing. Thank you very much for your time, and please come out and visit us at Calypso Farm.
Thanks, Tom. So hello there. My name is Marcus Mager with the Alaska Center for Energy and Power. Can everyone hear me? Or is that better? Is that okay? Good. So my talk today is a little bit about, it's a little bit different than a Calypso talk. I try to kind of find the connection between food and energy and kind of try to show that it's fairly complex to if we say, okay, how are like food and energy related? And I want to go on like 3 steps. First, I call it the back to basics. Then once we all like are on the same level and we are back to the basics, I basically go into the production, especially looking into greenhouse economics a little bit. And then once we got through that, I'm going through another level and look at externalities, basically what is not accounted for right now in our food prices. And Tom mentioned a little bit about that, and I hope I can clear up that picture a little bit. So with that, let's go to the back to the basics. I have this little picture here that basically shows how food actually works and what role energy plays there. We have the sun here growing our algae, and then here a clam or whatever eats our algae. Fish comes up, swims around, eats our clams. Another fish eats it, and then maybe at one point a fisherman gets the fish. So here's our like back to basic connection to between energy and food. Sun's energy produces algae, and from there on, our food web continues, and at one point, there is a human being in the food web, and if not, then, yeah, the fish dies, and the cycle starts all over again. The same, if we think about our sled dogs. I mean, we just put food in them, let's call it that simple, and they bring us from A to B. It's like having a car, you put gasoline in there, your energy, and the car drives you from A to B. Similar thing with your sled dog. They burn calories and bring you to a certain point where you want to go. Now, that was kind of the let's say, biology point of view. Now I want to go into the physics a little bit. And I remember from high school, there was the first law of thermodynamics. Anyone has a good guess on that, what that was all about? Anyone remembers? Some engineers here, some physicists? Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that there's basically no loss. Very good. And basically, that is what we are doing with our like, yeah, engines, or if we say like we produce electricity from a steam turbine, or if we dealing with this law all the time when we convert energy from one form to another. We basically just create another form of energy, but we never lose energy. Energy stays always constant. That's what that law states. And why is it important? Because here's what plays into that law is like of course we're losing some energy once we convert it from one form into another when we have our efficiency issues. But it is important because there is no such thing than lost energy, and I think that's kind of my point I want to do. There is no lost energy. We just convert it into a less valuable form for us in that moment when we use it. So back to the basics. Part 2, I would call that. A friend of mine lives in the woods year-round. It's close to Fairbanks. He lives in a double-wall tent, 8x10, and basically stays there for like 11 months of the year, comes out for a month, sells his artwork to the tourists, and then goes back and lives there. So what are his main concerns, or like his main like thoughts every day? Anyone has like a guess on that? Yeah, what do we eat today? That's how do we stay warm if it's cold in the winter, of course. And then there's also where do we go today, since he has a dog right there, so he's getting out and then wandering around a couple hours every day. So but basically that's his thing. What do we eat? And yeah, how do we stay warm? So basically what we need for life is just like, yeah, water, food, shelter, and yeah, some sufficient clothing if we're talking about life. in Alaska. So, in terms of how do we stay warm, that is his nice little wood pile. So that's basically his work when he's like, out there chopping wood, and that is what keeps him warm, and he knows that. And so he works on that, and these are like basically his his sources of energy, and that's what he needs to survive, and he's aware of that, and he just lives on that simple level. We also see here a chainsaw. So his basically his yearly bill in terms of like fuel is like, I don't know, $10. He buys like 2 gallons of fuel a year. So he lives on a really low energy level, but it's possible. And at one point we all were there, I would say. We all lived similar in the Stone Ages, right? But things change. Society changed, and that's why it gets more complex, and that's why I want to go to the second part and call it production. He doesn't have to worry about production. He just gets his food. So when we talk about production, I chose a greenhouse example. Basically, what I did a couple of years ago was an economic analysis of the greenhouse out at the Chena Hot Springs. How many people know the greenhouse at Chena, already saw it and visited? Oh, a lot of folks. That's awesome. So it's a hydroponic growing system, and so what happens after 7 days, they replant their little seedlings into their growing buckets, and then, like for like 32 days, they grow the lettuce there, and then you harvest the lettuce. And since I did an economic analysis there, I figured out it cost them approximately $2 to grow a head of lettuce there. So and then the energy part comes in. I have here electricity, transport, and heat. In my model, I used electricity, a cost of like 10 cents per kilowatt hour. I didn't include transportation costs, and I said heat is like $1.50 per gallon of heating oil. Then some of you might say, wait, isn't there, they use geothermal hot water and then the geothermal power plant, isn't that kind of free? I argue it's not, because someone had to put in the geothermal power plant, right? So, someone had to pay for that capital, and so the cost you basically, the costs that basically show up in your head of lettuce, they actually are the benefits for the geothermal power plant. Because you say, okay, with every kilowatt hour produced, I pay 10 cents towards the capital cost of the geothermal power plant, and that's how you pay back. Otherwise, why did we do that project out there? If the taxpayer or whoever paid for it, we can't do that in like 25 different places the same way, because we don't have so many grants. So you have to kind of pay back your capital. That's why I included the cost. And as Tom mentioned, or Julie mentioned earlier, the application for that is like if you have another heat source somewhere, like waste heat from a diesel engine, you could use that heat and then also heat a greenhouse with that, similar what's going on at Chena. So if you play around with the numbers a little bit, you come up with different scenarios, and basically the bottom line was that with every price increase by like 50 cents per gallon of heating, your cost per head of lettuce go up by like 5 cents. And again, that's all like, playing around with the numbers, and whatever Bernie decides at the end, what he wants to use or to what price he's going to sell, I don't know, but someone has to pay for the infrastructure, for the geothermal resource that he's using. All right, we covered the production. Now let's go to our externalities. Externalities are basically just like a fancy economic word, where that basically covers everything that's not, every cost and every benefit that is not in your price when you go to the store and buy your food or buy whatever, your product. That's basically what we call externalities. And I specifically look at a case study a friend of mine did, and looked at like local egg production in Fairbanks versus importing the eggs from the lower 48. So the question becomes, is buying local better? And Tom gave us like a lot of arguments. Yeah, buying local, you get fresher produce, you know your farmer. I mean, there are a lot of arguments that, yeah, it's better. But from one perspective, at least, you can argue that it's actually not better. And Tom mentioned that a little bit too. It's in terms of like your carbon footprint. So basically what this study did, it looked at the greenhouse gas emissions associated with the electricity use and also the transporting chickens, feed, or the eggs to Fairbanks. And it was a pretty simple model. It basically assumed you have 10 chickens and you basically have one light bulb, 100-watt light bulb, to heat your chicken coop in the winter for like, 180 days. And then basically just comparing the carbon footprint of your eggs produced in Fairbanks versus the carbon footprint of the eggs that actually come up to Fairbanks. And here's what played a major role in it. The electricity used for for basically keeping the light on and also like producing the heat so that the chickens stay warm in the winter. If we just look at the electricity for now, we see that Fairbanks actually has a really high carbon footprint. We see that's the coal part and that's the oil part. And then the other places where our eggs come from is Wisconsin, California, and Washington. And in Washington, they have a lot of renewables, so their carbon footprint, in terms of like just looking at the electricity, it's really small compared to what's going on in Fairbanks. So here's the argument, okay, if we just look at the electricity, Fairbanks definitely loses. But then what comes into the picture is transportation costs. And that's a pretty busy graph, and basically what's going on, it shows you where your eggs or your feed comes from, and then what's the carbon footprint. And here we see basically the current situation in Fairbanks, it's over here. Then there's, the middle has like scenarios that could work, and then on the outside we shouldn't worry about this. It's basically if you look at the ocean, basically bringing up stuff with a ship. So let's focus on what's going on right now. This is our Washington example. They had a really small carbon footprint because of their electricity, but what they do is they fly up their eggs here. So that dramatically increases the carbon footprint of the Washington eggs. But then we go look at California right here. Actually has a lower carbon footprint than the eggs produced in Fairbanks, what we see right here. So from a carbon footprint point of view, California eggs are the best eggs to buy in Fairbanks. If you, let's say, not care about the other quality properties of your eggs, like freshness or know your farmer. And then in the middle over there, I circled out that scenario that basically tells you that if we had Washington Energy in Fairbanks and produce our eggs here in Fairbanks, then we would have basically the lowest carbon footprint on that graph. Means like that would be the option to pursue. That would mean, okay, we have to have Washington Energy. And of course that's at least not going to happen soon, but that basically just shows you where we would end up if we use more renewables. So just to give you an idea that there is always the carbon footprint issue, and who knows what will happen with legislation, but it's definitely worth looking at that picture as well. So when we then kind of talk about carbon footprint, it's maybe more a question of where was the food produced and what were the inputs versus how far did the food travel. I mean, just as Tom said that they put it on like FedEx and then distributed it here, I mean, that's a pretty carbon expensive way of like distributing your food. But yeah, if you use a ship or wet truck, you can definitely lower your carbon footprint, as we saw in the chart before. So with that, I want to conclude that yeah, there are a lot of connections between energy and food, and it can get really complicated. I mean, we started out pretty basic, and looking at the externalities, and I just talked about the carbon footprint. There are a lot of connections, and basically in your daily life, you make your choices in terms of like what food you buy, what produce you buy, and that's basically how you determine like how your food system looks around you, like what is growing. Like, yeah, the farmer's market is growing because a lot of people use it. So it's more or less what I want to say, more or less up to you, and you kind of create the system we are living in, and that basically determines like the relationship between the food we eat and the energy we use. With that, yeah, thanks for your attention, and again, we have questions afterwards, and then I hope we have a little discussion. And with that, I think Jeff Werner is now taking over.
Great. Thank you, Marcus. My name is Jeff Werner. I'm with the University of Alaska Fairbanks School of Natural Resources and Agricultural Sciences, and I'm a research professional in horticulture and crop controlled environment, crop research and greenhouse crop production. And in doing that, my plate is huge, and there's a lot on my plate. It doesn't all come from Alaska, but at the same time, I am homegrown. I grew up in Palmer. I graduated from Palmer High School in their agriculture education program there, and went through the school and got my degree here at UAF, and as a result, I'm still here. I choose to live in Fairbanks. Palmer is a great place. I was down there last week enjoying their wind and their sun and their glaciers and the dirt and everything else that goes on there, but my parents lived down there, and I had a great time visiting with them, teaching them about growing in high tunnels. At the same time, I was in Homer, and I learned that the USDA has a program throughout the nation in helping individuals. Actually, it was inviting individuals to get involved in high tunnel production systems, and I'll tell you more about what that is. Also, I'm involved with the Chino Hot Springs Resort. Gwen Holdman, who's in the back of the room, and I, some 6 or more years ago, erected the first high tunnel at the resort, and from then we've grown into a larger full-scale production system, growing hydroponic lettuce and tomatoes, and we're looking at other herbs and different things. And the Chino Hot Springs is also, it's a year-round facility, using the hot water from the hot spring to heat the greenhouse, and also to energize the lighting systems and other facilities we need at the resort, primarily for the resort, but also the greenhouse is a kind of an add-on to that feature. What's really neat about the greenhouse at Chino Hot Springs is that because we can produce year-round, we're able to meet the lettuce need for the salads you have on the restaurant menu, and also to feed the employees that work out there. So in addition to the 60 employees, the numerous guests, we do have an actually, I don't like the word either, Tom, sustainable system, but we are self-sufficient and self-reliant in at least that ingredient on the menu. The tomato production system is a little bit different due to the cropping techniques and the season. Here in Alaska, it's really kind of a unique opportunity to live in interior Alaska. You know, a day like today, it's 80-some degrees out there. We're, enjoying this beautiful hot summer day, but at the same time, 6 months from now, we're enjoying a hot summer day, watching TV from the sofas, and the average temperature year-round in our house is about 72 degrees. Isn't that about right? But at the same time, it might be 65 below outside in the wintertime, and then 80 degrees inside. What's really unique about this opportunity in Alaska, we have these crazy long days. It's all day, all night, and all night, all day, depending on what time of the year you have. And at the university, we've been looking for opportunities and ways to manage that light, that temperature, and deal with that cold climate. And with that, but I'm looking at, recently we've got into this sustainability kick throughout the nation and here in Fairbanks. And the recent involvement with Galena, with the Alaska Center for Energy and Power and the Cooperative Extension, and also the Tanana Chiefs Conference, has helped me to understand not just community-supported agriculture, but what I call community production systems. And a part of that is the high tunnel system. These pictures are at the university, and of course we have the apple tunnels. Kendra Calhoun and Bob Wheeler have apple trees that they've been growing in those. Bob has since passed on, but we're continuing his research there, and then there are tunnels with our different crops in them. I'll go through that. Okay, now a high tunnel, sometimes we think of it as a hoop house, a high tunnel, high hoops, field greenhouses, temporary greenhouses, cold frames, multi-bay greenhouses and tunnels. And what's really unique in all of this, it's not new to Alaska. You know, if you've been here 5 years, if you've been here 50 years, if your ancestors came here on the first whaling ship in the turn of the century, they were doing this. They were trying to find some way to cover something with whatever they had, whether it was animal skins at one point, or it was plastic, viscline, glass, plexiglass, Lexan, you name it, we tried it. And I've even seen people that have taken clear duct tape type of things and built these reinforced greenhouses, just trying to find some way to protect their crops from the elements. And some guy in New York State thought it was a great idea to give it a name called High Tunnel, and then he went and got a bunch of federal money and left us behind. So we've been actually a demonstration project in Alaska for the last 100 years on how to survive in the Arctic or subarctic or even in South Central Alaska in protecting our crop from the environment. You know, one of the reasons that they use high tunnels in, I was just talking to a guy from Cordova, it rains too much. And so how do you keep the rain off your crop? And it's not so much they get waterlogged, they have these things that we don't have in Fairbanks called slugs. And when your crop gets wet and everything, the slugs are just crawling all over the place. But then if there's a greenhouse over it, then the birds can't come and eat the slugs. So the idea is keep your ground dry so the slugs don't go in. All kinds of neat things that are going on. Actually, at Thanksgiving, if you were watching NBC Today show, there on the White House lawn is when they instituted this great high tunnel project, and they were calling them hoop houses, or quick hoops. And part of it was to know who your farmer is, eat locally. The definition of a high tunnel is a temporary structure for improving, extending the growing season that we do understand here in Alaska. And it's unheated, naturally ventilated. Make sure my slides are looking right. Okay, and erected to grow in natural field soil and modify that field condition and with different techniques, and it's sufficiently tall enough for us to walk through. You know, there's nothing worse trying to bend over and get a crook in your back all day long. Actually, it's kind of neat to be able to be here at the Blue Loon because it's just down the street. If you're headed back into Fairbanks and you're looking past all those beautiful reindeer fields, there's some greenhouses, high tunnels and things out in the field, and that's actually where our research is taking place for the high tunnel piece of it. The disadvantages of high tunnels is the infrastructure. Temperature management. Here we have to worry about our plastics. In the lower 48, or as America as I like to call it, when we talk about working in Alaska, they really don't care. You know, these engineers that we have, the great people, Alaska, they really don't care. If they cared enough, they would come up here and invest the money in research and doing it in Alaska. I'm excited that the Cold Climate Housing Facility is here doing that work, but there's a lot of greenhouse companies out in the lower 48 that send us material that does not work. You know, imagine at 60 below, that greenhouse shrinks like a, yeah, it just shrinks. Okay, but everything doesn't move together, so you get gaps and heat loss and all kinds of things going on. At the university, we're able to heat the facility there with the university uses an oil-fired coal burning system in a steam loop, and that's how we heat our greenhouse on campus. I'm embarrassed to tell you that I don't know how much energy we use in that greenhouse, but I am proud to tell you that I hope I'm using your tax and state dollars wisely. But if I was to tell you how much energy that we actually spend keeping that greenhouse alive throughout the winter, you'd probably never eat another tomato from the university because it would be very expensive. Or you'd be very proud of it anyway. The problem that we run into is buildups of salts. We don't get a heavy rain load or a rainfall here in the interior. If we have another snowfall like we had this last year, we don't get a good washout and good flushing of our soils. And it also leads to a lot of challenge of trying to grow organically. You know, one of the advantages of growing organically and composting and tilling your soil is the microbial action in the soil, keeping things alive. But one of the missing factors that we have here is water. So we have to challenge with water and irrigation as well, and the structural strength. The high tunnels that we build, they're, as you can see here, these, I'm not sure where that one came from, but I'm familiar with these three. When you get a snow load, you have to go out there and pull the snow off of it. At Chena Hot Springs, the first tunnel here on the upper corner, that's actually Gwen Holdman and her husband put that together. and stretched that over, the covering over the top of that. We started as a high tunnel and we turned it into a greenhouse. The difference between a greenhouse and a high tunnel is that the greenhouse is heated and there's ends and doors and it has a ventilation system. The high tunnel in the lower left or lower right corner, that's actually one of Kendra's tunnels with the apple trees. They just got planted, I think, in there. And that's almost, 16 feet tall, 20 feet tall? It's incredible. I had to stand on a 14-foot ladder just to fix that thing yesterday, and scared myself to death. So what I've got to, this little tunnel here in the lower left-hand corner, you only build your greenhouse as tall as your tallest ladder. And that's a challenge when you're thinking about doing business out in the villages in Alaska where they don't have the equipment that we might here have access to, either through the university, the rental company, or some contractor. So you have to use a little common sense in what we're doing here. And the whole purpose of all this high tunnel work is helping Alaska's local communities to be self-sufficient and self-reliant. And earlier, Tom mentioned about our food and where it's coming from, and Marcus told you about all the energy and things that tie that all together. Now, how do you make it practical? The project that we're working on in Galena, our purpose there is for this community production system is to grow as much as we can in the 3 or 4 short growing months that we have in the season to feed our community or ourselves throughout that winter. When you think if you have 12 months to eat and only 3 months to grow, it becomes a challenge, and it's really frustrating when you see people that, and I like to play, and Fairbanks is we got Golden Days, we got Pioneer Park, and we got a lot every day of every week for 3 months or something to do in this community. But when you come down to looking at where does our food come from, we've got people that are at the farmers market on Wednesdays and Saturdays, and other markets throughout the community on different days, and we have the CSAs, but there's only a few people, and most of you are in this room, that are actually employed in the activity of producing food for our tables. And when you look at a community of Fairbanks, and we've got close to 30,000 if they count people right or wrong, there's about that many people. But when you have less than 100 people, generally on a good day, involved in that activity of making that food available, there's no doubt why we have to go out of state to bring that food in. Now, I do support conventional agriculture. I'm the state director for the Future Farmers of America in Alaska, and I work with young people throughout the entire nation. So when I go to the Salinas Valley in California, I know those people who are growing that lettuce, and I trust what they're doing. I have relatives in Yuma, Arizona that are growing lettuce in Yuma that I know comes to Fairbanks, Alaska. I've got relatives in Michigan that work in the pickle fields that I know goes into Heinz 57 or the Heinz pickle barrel that make it to Alaska. So we have when we think local, I like to think global on what we're doing. But at the same time, what are we doing for ourselves today? Can we produce 100% of our food, what we're eating today? Possible. But at the same time, we've got a large community that we're responsible for. So at the university, what we're doing, growing different crops, so hopefully we can help find ways to make that possible locally, and at the same time, inspire others to get involved. One of the things that the site location is an important thing with building these greenhouses. Now, if you think about Chena Hot Springs and you think about Fairbanks, they're similar, but yet different. The Chena Hot Springs has a microclimate out there. They're about 2,000 feet up in the elevation. It's cooler there. They get a little bit more wind, and so some things do well. They do have warm soil throughout the year. I was just out there picking mint last night actually, and I have this crazy idea of growing what I call my Chena mint tea, and selling it as a tourist thing to visitors that come to Alaska. But at the same time, we have spearmint, peppermint, chocolate mint, apple mint, and that's overwintering in the soils. In any other state, it would be a weed. Here, I see it as an asset, that we have something that we can grow that has loads of vitamin C and all kinds of great healthy potential to it. But at the same time, we can't do that here in Fairbanks. But then just across the street over by where the greenhouses are, we're overwintering wonderful raspberries. Kendra's got a whole greenhouse full of apples. And last year I had this crazy idea of planting horseradish. One of the things that I like to do, and many people in here, there's this great place out in Fox that sells this 1.5 inch prime rib steak, and a beautiful place, and they serve the best horseradish with that. But wouldn't it be awesome if we could have Alaskan grown, Alaska fresh horseradish, creamed horseradish to go with that? So the horseradish I planted last year overwintered, and I don't know what's going to happen with it, but at the same time, it's there. and that has nothing to do with this picture. But at Chena, one of the things that we do have out there is wind. And when you're building your greenhouse and thinking about your structures, you got to think of the wind. Galena, it's on the Yukon River, and it's in a wind tunnel. So as the wind whips across that greenhouse or that village, it sucks any opportunity for heating that greenhouse out. So when we're looking at structure, we look at wind load, we're looking at how it affects the structure, how it affects, there's all kinds of things to think of. But at the same time, it's just a matter of balancing your local environment to your climate for your resource. In other designs, it's, what does it look like? I've talked about the height of the greenhouse and different structures. And the picture there to the right, what's unique, and actually if any of these, go back one, is that I can drive my tractor through it. I'm all about a John Deere tractor. And when in doubt, I'll be driving in circles out there at the university field just because I can drive a John Deere tractor. But at the same time, when I'm farming or growing through these high tunnels, the idea is to grow through them. Now this is just a small example of what could be a larger scale production system. So if you're looking at, I know Rosie Creek Farms is putting up hay grove tunnels, and as to how to protect that crop. Here we're looking at something that's probably probably 40 by 60, I think. I don't know what it is, Kendra, but 42 by 96. But imagine that on 5 acres. And that's not uncommon if you go to Oregon or Washington or someplace else in the lower 48. And it's just all about the frame, the structure, building something exciting. But then we have this beautiful Arctic weather that comes in, and the challenge we have is to protect our structure so it doesn't get destroyed, or protect the crop that's inside it. And so when we're looking at facilities at Chena Hot Springs, what we had to look at was, if we heat that greenhouse year-round, where does that snow go? What is the snow load, or what is the pressure on the sides of the walls, and how do we deal with it? And using some common sense ideas, so that as a commercial grower yourself, we want to make those mistakes so you don't have to. If we're making the mistakes at the university, they just kind of say, well, those educated people out there don't know what they're doing, which we kind of think we do. But at the same time, that means that's something that if you were to make that same mistake, that might be costing your livelihood. Let us make the mistakes so you don't have to. And the structure material. People like to use PVC. I like to use conduit or a metal structure. PVC has a tendency to degrade over time in the extreme heat that we have here with these crazy long days. But also that cold is really what kills it. And it gets really brittle. And if a moose is out there trying to eat your apple tree, it'll break it. And the end walls. What do you put on the end of your greenhouse? I like to leave my end walls open, but the lower left-hand or lower right-hand corner, I've got just a little hole in there where we can pass through. And that's early in the spring. We've covered things up so they don't frost. But our field looks like that again in the winter, or right in September going into winter. We're trying to extend that growing season. We want to pick those extra strawberries. We want those green beans that are still hanging on that fruit, on that plant, just to be there so we can have fresh green beans into the season. And also because you get those early frosts. I don't know if you realize in Fairbanks we have a winter, summer season. Winter is officially over in April, and then we get a frost in May. So anybody who's planted your garden right now, just expect it to die in the next couple of days. Hate to tell you that. Cover it. Don't forget to do that. If Mike Schultz on the TV tells you to cover your garden, it'd be a good idea to do it. And then expect it again in the 1st of July. And that's about time when you go fishing, so everything's kind of dead when you get back. And then expect again the first week of August during the fair, and then again in the 1st of September when school starts. So if you look at the fun things that we do, that's usually when your garden's going to probably die. But if you prepare for it, you can have you can survive the system. Okay, so one of the things that we're looking at the university is, what do you put on your greenhouse? And there's 4 little tunnels out there, and I won't tell you what's in them because last time we told you on record, and I realized I'm on the camera, that once I told you about Kendra's apples, everybody went to pick Kendra's apples. So if I told you that I had strawberries and corn and sunflowers and green beans and stuff in these tunnels, which there probably won't be now that I told you that, but that's what we do because we're looking for crops that are innovative yet have economic potential and can be done at home. But when you order a greenhouse out of the catalog, what do you get? You get a bunch of metal, some tech screws, and the instructions that say use your cordless drill, and a box of plastic. Now, to you that might be plastic. To me, it's a polyethylene material that's got a UV protection in it, and it's designed to filter out different rays of light and different things. We started with clear polyethylene, and then we used 3 different types of plastics. In the picture you can see here, there's a green one, and there's actually a red tint to one of these. Each of these plastics has a different function on the crop inside the tunnel. So if you're looking to grow raspberries, you might grow one color or with one type of plastic. If you're growing with an you're looking at growing watermelons, which we could do here in Fairbanks if you really wanted to. You might use a different thing. And then outside this beautiful tunnel, in between the tunnels, I've got all kinds of celery. If you're not growing celery in Fairbanks, go out and buy some. You still have time to plant it. It grows like a weed. And green beans. If you're growing green beans, my favorite's Provider, and it just these beautiful green beans that flower all summer long. And I'm not trying to sell you green beans, but at the same time, it's another potential crop that does really well. But at the same time, we put the green beans, I shouldn't tell you this either, little research secrets, that just a small crowd here, no one's watching on the TV, right? So we plant things in the field for a couple of reasons. First primary reason is for research. And we have a global research project looking at the science of what we're doing, but then we have a local research need trying to provide an opportunity for production for that food and fiber for Alaska's tables. But at the same time, we're always planting something unique and different, trying to find an innovative edge on our next project. And the horseradish is one. We've been working with asparagus, and there's some asparagus growing someplace out by Chena Hot Springs. We've done a lot of work with raspberries, and just recently there's this big push statewide for rhubarb, and so we're looking at how do you grow a rhubarb pie. But when you come into the field, you need an escort. That way we have different things out there we don't want you to step on. But when you come down there, there's things that are unique and different, and then there's things that might be common. So it's really innovating. It's kind of exciting to see. And there's some more pictures of the different tunnels and different things growing in them. The tall things along the side of the walls are raspberries, growing them in the pots. In Alaska, our growing season, our market season is May 15th to September 15th if you're growing for the tourists, and for most of the restaurants. And so that's what we were trying to hit. A lot of it's in crop timing. You want to time your crop for when your market is available. And in Fairbanks, the farmers market opened second week of May 8th. I went there just to see how many people showed up. And it was obvious that May 8th was a long time from September 15th or 20th, because I think more people came to the farmers market than there were at the Tanana Valley Fair. And there was just the enthusiasm of people coming to see what was there. And there was actually quite a bit there. Flowers and bedding plants and all kinds of things to take home, lots of honey. But the enthusiasm was great, and the sad part is that you take it home, you planted it probably dead. Actually, we haven't had a freeze since then, so it's probably still alive. Okay, and then plastic. If you were to build a greenhouse and you just go down to the local hardware store and you get just plastic, it probably is going to disappoint you. And by the time you get to the end of the season, it's going to be all brittle. It'll work. If that's all you have, it'll work. But it's not going to be there next year. So it's just something to keep in mind. So that's kind of why and these things are available on Farm Tech and any greenhouse site available. And if you're looking for more information, you can check with Cooperative Extension, and if they can help you find a retailer for that or source. And covering materials, I covered that a lot. Okay, so in the greenhouse, we're growing strawberries. And strawberries, this is something I was excited to take to Galena as an idea. Why would we grow strawberries in Galena? Well, if you ever go to Fred Meyer Safeway and you pick up the strawberry box and you look underneath it, I notice people doing that and they see this fuzzy stuff growing underneath there. The shelf life of strawberries is not all that great. So if you can grow those things locally and people can enjoy that beautiful strawberry and mix it with their rhubarb, they can have a great rhubarb strawberry pie. But at the same time, there's something fresh, local, with lots of vitamin available. The whole Galena project, the exciting thing about that, it was a grant, or is a grant, through the EPA to reduce the carbon footprint of going into Galena. And so every pound of broccoli, every Brussels sprout, every green bean, anything that we can grow locally means it's not flown in from someplace else. And so the greenhouse, it's going to be 30 feet by 72. It's going to be out in front of the pool if you're familiar with Galena. It's going to be heated from the waste. They call it waste heat. I call it unused heat. Waste heat is if you open the water on your sink and you know that you're paying 20 cents a kW or kilowatt here in Fairbanks. You have electric water heater. That's waste heat. Shame on us for doing that. Hopefully we're not, because you're probably paying for the water that's in the tank as well. But at the same time, waste heat is something that's gone away. But unused heat at Galena is heat that's available for the taking. And they heat their city buildings, they heat their swimming pools, they heat all their facilities locally with this heat source. And so we're going to take just a piece of that and heat the greenhouse. Now the greenhouse, the purpose of that is to grow as much as we can in the 3.5 short months of the summer to eat into the rest of the 8 months that we have to survive. But, or like I said, 9 months. But at the same time, what do we grow? And what we eat in Fairbanks isn't the same thing that they eat in Galena, unless you're from Fairbanks and moved out there. But if you think about, if you were living in the villages in Alaska, what would you eat? You'd probably do the basic potato, cabbage, carrot, onion, the basics. They can grow that. Do they? Most of them don't. And there's a couple of people in Galena that do grow out there, but they don't grow enough for the entire community. So what we're encouraging them to do is in this greenhouse, we're going to look at bedding plants for make some pretty flowers and hanging baskets so they can enjoy their summer. But also we're looking at broccoli starts, cabbage, cauliflower, and Brussels sprouts and kohlrabi and all these neat things. And then instead of selling them at the greenhouse, we'll sell them, or trying to grow them ourselves, we'll distribute those throughout the community so that the people locally can grow that. And throughout Galena, there's a lot of excitement to do that. But at the same time, Galena also feeds ruby, mulatto, Caltag, and up and down the Yukon throughout the summer. But the real challenge is, and Tom had it on one of his last slides, is preserving that food. What do we do today to bottle, can, freeze, dry, whatever it is we need to do to store that food into the future? I'd almost have a bet across the room here that I could probably pick out the people that have one of those large aluminum canning pressure cooker things. And generally the younger people don't even know how to use it, let alone what it is. My own mother, she used to can when she was a kid, and I went to use a canner cooker, and she said, Jeff, be really, really careful. That thing is going to blow up on you. I'm like, what are you talking about, Mom? It's like, you need to take it to the Cooperative Extension Service and get it pressure tested and do this and that and everything else. And I'm like, Mom, you just turn it on and use it. And she has a fear of this thing, so she has quit canning. So I showed her how to can pickles and beets and carrots, and it was no big deal. So now she's back. That was just last year, actually. But we've gotten out of that culture of doing for ourselves. But at the same time, where do you find a root cellar in Fairbanks, Alaska? There's no community root cellar. Is it the need of the community to help us do that? But it used to be when you built a house, you built a root cellar to keep your carrots and potatoes and cabbage. Here, you don't even grow enough carrots and potatoes and cabbage to store them because you know that Fred Meyer is going to be selling those beautiful potatoes from Delta. They say Delta Gem on them, or the folks from the Matanuska Valley. But at the same time, where do they store them? And do they have storage enough on their farms for all of the state of Alaska? The answer actually is no. They don't have storage enough. They have storage for their commodity, their potatoes, and their carrots, but that's not enough to feed our state. So what we're kind of doing, and in all this food stuff throughout Alaska, is encouraging people to grow locally, to grow enough. The food bank is always asking people to grow an extra row, and I know Sam would probably be proud of me for telling you that. But at the same time, are we growing enough to support our communities? And it'd be great to do that. But back to strawberries. So now I'll close on that because I think I'm totally out of time. But on the strawberries, when do your strawberries flower? We grow strawberries in Fairbanks. And you probably enjoy these strawberries. The quinaults come back every year, and you have that secret berry that your grandma left you, or somewhere you found it on someone's homestead that comes back year after year. Recently we've been growing berries that are the commercial varieties from California and Oregon, Washington. There's long day berries, short day berries, June berry, all kinds of different berries. But one of the things that we found in Fairbanks is that in August, the first week of August, right during the fair, everything just goes crazy. Of course, that's when we're back from hunting or fishing, looking to go hunting, and the smoke maybe has cleared away if it showed up. And it quit raining for a couple days. But the strawberries flowers go crazy. The zucchini is going crazy. Everything is just exploding in the garden. And part of that's to do with, yeah, we've had a great growing season. Things are just ready to explode. But that's when it starts getting dark enough that you can actually start to see the stars. So if you think about that dark period and flowering, so what we're looking at into university is how do we make that dark period a little earlier? It's kind of crazy to think you live in Fairbanks, you want to see it dark. But how many of you go to bed at night and pull that shade and put all that tin foil and duct tape all over your house so you can sleep at night? Not me. I took a lesson from Rich Seifert. I conserve energy. I just turn off my lights and open my windows. But at the same time, you go off to Eielson or Fort Wainwright, and you think they all live in caves. They all complain about the dark winters. They all live in the dark all summer long because they put everything all over the windows. Now, the strawberries actually like that too. So if you can move that dark period up into the earlier in the summer, you can actually get those strawberries to initiate that flowering process earlier. So then you could pick your strawberries longer into the season. And so how do you make all that happen? Well, that's part of the research that we're currently working on, so maybe that'd be a lecture for another day. But at the same time, with those little tunnels out there in the field, sometimes they might look like insufficient activities that we're doing, driving around on my John Deere tractor, but really what we're looking for is ways to better feed our Alaska communities. And at the university in the wintertime, we're trying to grow crops that are efficient energy-wise, and then also in the summertime using the natural environment to make that production period possible. I've used up all my time, but I know there's opportunity for questions, and I will give it back to
And then we'll have all the speakers come up so you guys can ask questions of whoever you'd like. And as the speakers, if we can just have you guys repeat the questions, and maybe the wandering mic will work a little bit better now. And that way everybody can hear it. Thanks.
Do we have any questions out there?
Yeah, Tom, you said that there are, I have had the impression, and I may be just wrong because I haven't sought it out, but I've had the impression that all of the community-supported ag is oversubscribed. You said there's options. I didn't know that.
Is this on?
Yeah.
Well, in the past, we've never had to advertise. We have had a full CSA, but as of this spring, none of the farms, as of beginning of May, none of the farms had a full CSA shareholder list.
Including yours?
Including ours. We still are 2 people. Just this last week, we are almost closing the gap, and we have two shares left. We have the school gardens that have CSAs. Those are still open. I believe Pete and Lynn at Spinach Creek may be full now, but Dogwood Garden is not full. Mike Emmers, I'm not sure. He's got a wait list going. I'm not sure how he works his list. Wild Rose Camp actually cut back because they could see that they were having trouble filling it, and they said they're just going to cut back on production. So no, there has been a, whether it's from financial, the economic downturn, definitely the full circle issue. No, there are still CSA shares available at some of these farms. Dogwood Gardens, which is Bill and Cheryl Wood, they still need people for sure. Is that clear? Other questions?
I have another question for Marcus. I really liked your footprint analysis, and it really speaks. That last slide that you did with showing that Fairbanks would win if we had renewables and they had a lower carbon footprint for electricity. But does that include getting the food here for growing the chickens, for instance, or the eggs? It does.
That's included in the analysis.
So that really says that if we had renewable electricity, that in a carbon footprint sense, we'd be better off raising our own chickens and having our own eggs.
Yeah, then it's definitely like it.
That's very interesting.
And if I can add to that, if you want to bring a pack of eggs up from the local store, and I'll crack them against my eggs, and the quality is one of those externalities that there's no, it's obvious difference. So
My secretary brings me eggs.
right, so that's something that we really have to think about, local quality and also food security. The more farms we have, the more farms that we're supporting now in the long run, if there are not a conspiracy theory or catastrophe person, but we want to support local economy. We want to have a safety net. We need to build more local farms. Tom, did you have a question?
No, I was just going to point out that food security issue is a trade-off because we've got about a 3-day supply in the big stores in Fairbanks and about 10 days in Anchorage. So if you do have a natural disaster that shuts down transportation, you can see it in Fred Meyer's. If the trucks don't make it for one day, the shelves start going bare. So that's a huge issue to try to spread out some of that risk and make it a little bit more secure up there.
Yes, Becky.
I had a question relating to the chickens again. Now, does that take, it takes into account feed, but is that feeding them 12 months a year? Because my birds consume hardly any store-bought feed in the summer. Their store-bought food consumption goes way, way down.
You know, part of the numbers that he used probably was for a commercial production season for a full 12 months. So they're probably birds in confinement. So if you're doing an
No, they should not.
open range,
It's basically it compared like lower 48, 10 chickens there, the same like 100-foot light bulb in the lower 48. And then, 10 chickens here in Fairbanks, 100-foot light bulb for like 180 days. And then comparing that footprint, what goes in there, like transportation of food or transportation of the eggs, and then, what basically makes the most sense, or like it has the lowest carbon footprint. So basically, it doesn't take into account production methods, because if you look at a commercial scale in the low 48 and then compare that, or go to 10 chickens in Fairbanks, you can't really compare the two different productions. So it's just really, you have 10 chickens down there in the low 48 in Washington, where we get our eggs from, or in California, and how do they compare to 10 chickens up here in Fairbanks? Yeah.
And has anybody looked at ducks? Because I have ducks that lay every day year-round, almost, unless they molt. And they need hardly any heat. This last winter, they hardly needed any supplemental heat. I mean, they still need light, but they seem to be a very efficient egg source.
What variety ducks do you have?
I got magpie and khaki Campbells.
My ducks just lay in the short spring season. We don't put any heat lamp in. We just have 14 hours of light for our chickens, and they lay through the winter. The duck does not. And then obviously in the spring, the production, they really start thriving, and the egg production goes up. But those are the things, is we need to have a more open communication with all these people. We have a fantastic resource here in Fairbanks of gardeners, and everyone has different varieties, has different techniques. We've got lots of different microclimates. So we really, we need to open up this communication and learn. It's not just that we know the things. Everyone here can be in on the conversation. That's what made me come out tonight, is to try and get community involvement and get more two-way communication.
I have two comments, just as a quick follow-up to that. Not to overload the Master Gardeners listserv, but that actually serves that purpose right now.
Yeah.
So folks that have gone through the wonderful Cooperative Extension Service Master Gardeners program, who want to participate, have an ongoing dialogue about ideal varieties and tips and whatnot. And then the other thing I wanted to ask, and this may be a little oblique to the topic, but as a follow-up to what both Toms said about food security, I'm curious if the Borough Planning Department or the Zoning Commission, or if there are any other governmental entities that are doing anything to help ensure positive zoning for the farms that still exist in the local area, and things that make farming appealing from a tax perspective. And I'm just totally ignorant of that. So if there's anybody here who knows anything about that, I'm kind of curious.
well, I'll take a politically correct view on it, but I would
Use mic,
encourage you.
Jeff?
What's that?
Use the mic.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll take a politically correct viewpoint on it, but I would encourage you very strongly to all of you, to pay attention to what's happening in North Scarborough right now. within our zoning and planning and situation. Been following it myself, and with the question that you asked, I would say that they could use some advice on what they're doing. Agriculturally, it's one thing to be an agricultural producer, but I see everyone as an agricultural consumer and producer at the same time. And just because I want to grow pig in my farm, in my 5 acres on top of Murphy Dome, who is the government to tell me that I can't provide for my family? But at the same time, if I sell that pig at the fair, then I'm a commercial entity and the rules all change. At the same time, but I would be very suggestive to paying attention to what's happening at the borough. Especially with your grandfather rights. There's something coming down right now about the grandfather rights in the borough in respect to agriculture. And some of the things that if you actually didn't know what was happening, you would be appalled, I think. But with that, though, at the same time, the food security issues in the Fairbanks, North Star, or in the interior of Alaska, we have a farming area out in Eielson Farm Loop Road. There is a production area. Chena Hot Springs Road traditionally has been a production area. But if you look around Fairbanks, and you look at all these new trees, they cut down all the trees around the turn of the century to fuel all of the stern wheelers going up in the gold miners and everything that was happening here in the interior. But if you live out in Hearst Road, out in North Pole area, that used to be big dairy farm production and potato fields. And now that's all grown into forest, and we think it's pristine. But it wasn't. But maybe 30, 40 years ago, that was actually all in production. But when we started building houses, all that changed. And down in the Matanuska Valley, there's a group, Alaska Farmland Trust. Actually, it's a statewide group that is actually involved in preserving farmland. And if you have a piece of farmland and you want to see that going into perpetuity, you can actually work with those folks, and they'll help you make that happen for your future generations.
Is working with the school bag and the food bank and a few of the local farmers like Mike Emmers on coming up with basically policy advice for the borough. They're looking into agriculture in the borough and how it can be supported. So they're, of course now it's a busy season, so they're going to sort of work on it in the fall after things calm down for the farmers. But yeah, there are some organizations working on it right now.
Does anybody know where the largest agriculture production area in Fairbanks is? Okay. So if you're looking at edible crops, Esther would be one. Where might be another? Hamilton Acres. And if you drive through Hamilton Acres and you see all the beautiful flower beds and hanging baskets and things that they do with their flower bed garden designs and their lawns, and there's actually more grass in Fairbanks mowed as lawns than we do in all of Alaska as hay grass. But we often forget that the horticulture industry, when you're out buying flowers and stuff from Ann's and Cindy Tack and Lee Rissy and Hometown and the local producers throughout the area, that is a significant part of our agriculture production for our local use. But also when you look at those greenhouses and what they do with those greenhouses throughout the summer, growing peppers and tomatoes and cucumbers and all kinds of great things. If you didn't buy their flowers, they couldn't afford to do the rest. Just as a little plug for them if you're thinking about buying something from Seattle.
It just seems like there needs to be that for security.
The question was if there was any kind of discussion about a community root cellar. And that would be a good question for Deidre up on top. That's part of the Fairbanks Economic Development Committee looking at agriculture issues. That would be definitely something that would be an asset to our community, as well as a community-based processing facility. So if Rich Seifert was to grow an extra acre of cabbage or broccoli, he could bring it to the processing facility and we can make sauerkraut and freeze that.
I'm wearing my shirt from the Fairbanks Community Cooperative Market, which is not extant yet, but we are getting there. And one of the aspects of, if we do use the food land, is that there's room in the back, and some of our board members were at the food policy meeting, which has come up, somebody mentioned earlier. that it could be the rear part of that building could be a processing and storage facility, because that was a need that's been pointed out for the community. It's not a root cellar, but it's a pretty nice location for a food storage and processing facility if we got to that point.
Do you want to add on to
Well,
that?
I do. This could be really old information and currently incorrect, but I know at least 10 years ago, the food bank was available for large-scale processing. So if you lived in an apartment and hunted for a moose, you could actually go to the food bank and use their processing area to process your moose. Maybe that's no longer possible. I have no idea. I don't want to mislead people, but there may be at least one limited option here in town already, right now.
And just to follow up, where I live, I can't have a root cellar because my ground won't support it. And I'm just wondering if there's been any research about an above ground root cellar and where I would go to find that information.
Rich, do you have any information on
I
that?
don't want to say.
Yeah.
I would encourage you to check with your cooperative extension agents.
Isn't there
Tom
something
Johns,
in Galena that's
you know
like
Tom
that?
Johns. Well, Tom has been, I thought, working on a root cellar book for Alaska for a long time. Actually, the Harrieds had a semi-above ground root cellar for years. They used to heat it with an electric heater when it got too cold. But people have done all sorts of things. I mean, you should Google root cellars and tour the internet for root cellars. You'd be amazed at what the history and the wide variety and the wonder of root cellars is. It's an interesting world.
What is the temperature that a root cellar has to maintain on average?
Well, it depends on the crop because it's a humidity and temperature relationship. So you store your potatoes differently than you store your cabbages or your carrots. So often a root cellar is divided into different sections. You have your cooler, moister area, your drier and maybe slightly warmer area. But there's a lot of things with root cellar. You have to prepare your crops properly. Often you have to cure your crop before it goes in. So that's one thing with a community root cellar is like, if I'm going to take the time to do my crops correctly, there's a lot of issues there. I want to be eating my crops, people not necessarily sharing. So there's a lot to a root cellar.
There's some things that work community, and there's some things that don't work in community.
Definitely.
At the university, we keep our walk-in cooler where we store our potatoes and radishes and different items throughout the winter, about 38 to 40 degrees. And that seems to do well, especially for overwintering strawberries and raspberry plants as well. When I was growing up in Palmer, one of the things that we did was we had access to a lot of sawdust. Northland Wood has got sawdust and wood chips and different things, and we actually built a box within a box. That just died. No. A box within a box, and we had a 2-foot wall, and we filled it with sawdust. So actually, we improvised. And just recently, I was at a place across the street from K&K over by BY Farms, or Tenor on Meats, as it is now. And there's a place there that builds styrofoam blocks. And I was looking at stacking up some of those blocks and actually creating an insulated shelter. If you got the resources to do that, it might be cheaper just to let Fred Meyer keep your potatoes for you. But at the same time, where's your food security for that 1 month supply or 1 year supply you might need? Or to even keep your own potatoes through the winter.
So we need to do one more question because Adam needs to clear us out for his 8 o'clock movie. So just let's do one more.
Any other questions?
Right.
Based on your research at the university there, is there any one particular crop that actually stands out amongst all the others as far as not a whole bunch of work to do, I'm real busy, so I don't have a whole bunch of time to tend to a garden, but I'd sure like to do it,
Any of the cold crops do well up here. The broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower. The secret is keeping the moose from eating them. One of the things that I found is phenomenal up here is kohlrabi. And if you're not familiar with kohlrabi, go get some starts from your local greenhouse and try it. Another crop that I've been working with lately is daikon radish. And it's just an incredible radish. It grows huge, and
if you're not familiar with it, it's what, if you go down to the Korean restaurant below the bowling alley, and they have all these little plates of all these little pickles things, that's what you're eating, is a daikon radish. The zucchini does very well up here, and also if you're looking for something unique, the spaghetti squash. And if you go to the farmer's market, the growers there, if you're looking for what to do next year, go to the farmer's market, try out a bunch of different things, and then take home some of those ideas. Something that might be a word of encouragement, though, if you're growing any root crops and you're tired of root maggots, go to Hometown, or I don't know if Cindy Tack or Ann's Greenhouse has it, but get some what we call row cover or frost cloth and cover your plants early in the season, so to keep those root maggots, keep the flies off your plants. And so you'll be able to enjoy your fruits of your labors later into the season. Also, it helps keep the moose away. So if you cover your cabbage with this frost cloth, hopefully they won't munch on your cabbage before you want to.
I would say that potatoes are one of the easiest because the moose don't go for them. You can get a good crop out of there, and you can store it fairly easily, so you can be eating through the season. Also, they don't need a lot of nutrients, so they're a good breaker crop for a new garden site. So potatoes, and there's lots of great varieties out of there. And Ebbison Farm has their seed potatoes grown around town. So one, you're supporting your local farms here, getting that seed potato, and then you're getting a good crop that you can store through the season.
Well, thanks so much, you three. We appreciate it.